Hello, everyone. Today I'm sitting down with Clyde De Couto, Enterprise Account Executive, and Iain Murray, Vertical Leader, to hear their thoughts on building strong client relationships and what makes an organization successful. Many times, a company's success is viewed solely through the lens of its products and services, but the success of an organization relies on many more factors. Would you be able to elaborate on how Sterling Backcheck does this?
Sure. Thanks, Jennifer. So as an organization, if you think about, our pillars of interest really and how we build out our team when we decide to work with clients and especially with the client-facing associates, we really focus around the client experience and ensuring that our clients are fully supported. There's a couple of ways that Sterling ensures this happens. First of all, when you become a Sterling customer, you have a dedicated account team. So the dedicated account team focuses on ensuring that you have a one-on-one experience with us and really help you through the process in terms of whether you have questions on services, solutions, that you need more information on best practices, or understanding how we could potentially make your experience better. When we talk about the client experience, typically this includes one-on-one client meetings where we look at information on how things are progressing, turnaround times, understanding what services you're ordering, and then sharing, of course, if there are services that we feel that you could benefit from as well. We also have focused account reviews in some cases. And of course, while these are structures that we've built, we always follow the client's lead on what they'd like or how they'd like us to interact with them. So some clients would say, Clyde, every quarter I'd like to meet with my account team and better understand what's happening with our account. Is there anything that we can do to make things, work more progressively? Are there ideas that could help us cut costs or drive value? And we would bring those up in those meetings. The other way that we do this as well is having so much of experience through our personnel that have been here for a very long time. We also provide content like roundtables, webinars, white papers, our recently launched compliance blog that I know our marketing team has worked really hard on. And we really try to drive our clients to these different venues of information to help support them, whether it's day-to-day requirements or with new trends that we're seeing in the industry.
And how does Sterling Backcheck provide their clients with step-by-step consultation for industry best practices?
So another great question. What we've done in some of our spaces here is we've actually verticalized our approach from a client structure, support organization, as well as sharing with clients information that is pertinent to their industry. When we created this vertical structure, what we're able to do is better understand what's happening in our client's industry. And you're actually speaking to the person that's managing all of the accounts in said industry. So for example, in my role today, I manage the staffing and business services vertical. So if I see that there's a trend with a new service that certain staffing agencies are picking up with us, I would bring that to the attention of my other clients that are not currently using that information. Likewise, we can also see trends that are happening in the industry. So if we see certain industries that staffing is recruiting for start to spike in terms of requirements, we make sure that our teams are there. One of the examples this year is when we launched our vaccine record collection program. We had a lot of clients in a very short time want to learn more and jump on to sort of experience what that experience could look like for their candidates. So we really try to drive that messaging forward in a verticalized approach. The other thing that we do as well is all of our leaders, Iain being one of them, who you'll hear from later on this call, all of our leaders also have long tenured experience inside of these industries or serving them. So they bring a natural progression of value from understanding what's happened in the industry and where the industry is going. And of course, we invite them to share best practices if our clients are looking for that type of information. From a support structure as well, what we've done is we've kind of divided our approach in some cases. So on some of our enterprise clients' accounts, what we have is myself, who's an account executive, and then we have what we refer to as a CSA internally. But the CSA will handle your day-to-day requirements. So as your team starts requesting services from us, if there are questions about specific files, we have somebody who's there as a point of contact so that they can address all of those questions and your requests to our account team are not going into outer space and you're waiting for a response. This is also being in the industries that I serve. I obviously manage the leads that come in this industry for larger accounts. And we see that that is the number one reason why people come to Sterling, at least to learn more about our services, is because they've had concerns come up with their current programs, with their current providers, and they haven't been able to get a hold of anyone to answer those questions or those concerns. So we really try to offer that approach where you've got someone that you can talk to, whether it's a team or a specific individual, and that you're aware of who they are, their contact information. Also for your candidates, we also provide, as through the entire onboarding process, we provide supports for candidate as well, if the client requires that. So we can essentially take that off your plate. Outside of the sort of day-to-day account management, the other thing that we like to bring to the table is also benchmarking information associated to industry. And obviously with that will also come summaries of what we're seeing in the industry. So in my regular touch points with clients, we'll share what we're seeing as sort of the trend that is occurring. And in some cases, they aren't even aware that this is happening because it hasn't hit their desk yet. So we actually help clients plan for what's coming down the pipeline.
That's it. Thank you so much. And Iain, I have a question for you. What are some common misconceptions about personalized background screening programs?
That's a good question. I think whether it's personalized to an organization or not, there are quite a few misconceptions, and some of those come from, I think, the differences in programs and legislation between countries like Canada and the US. So we see quite often an American based company that is operating in Canada, and they're applying their screening policy as if it was the US. So with that comes certain misconceptions like how fast checks can be done, what databases you should be searching, what you can do with the information, lots of things like that. So some of them are based on geographic differences. Some are based on certain industries as well, or maybe information that was once valid 30 years ago. There's a thought that a lot of our services are subscription-based, or that there might be hidden costs. It's pretty much a pay-as-you-go industry if you're doing things the right way, that you're only paying for the checks that are being completed, and you don't need to do anything unnecessary. So those are some of the main things I think that come up. As I mentioned, subscriptions, hidden costs, and some of the, I guess, finer details of what you're allowed to screen for in Canada and what you can do with that information.
Perfect. And what qualities should organizations look for in their background screening provider?
Well, expanding a bit on my previous answer there, I think one of the good things to look for as a foundation is if you're with an organization looking to implement a background screening program and your company only operates in Canada, it's more often than not, it would be good to partner with an organization based in Canada for some of the reasons I just mentioned earlier. Companies that are focused on the US often look at things through an American lens, and they might be suggesting you do searches that either aren't permissible or don't add any value. So it's likely not a good use of your funds. Similarly, if you are a global company and you have global screening needs, it's also beneficial to work with a company that has a footprint, likely an office in different countries around the world. Again, if you're only looking at things through a Canadian lens, the company may not be aware of the nuances in France, Germany, Belgium. I'm picking one very narrow area in Europe, but any country around the world, it's good to have some regional expertise with boots on the ground. There's a big difference between saying that you're a global company because you can do a global search and actually having a footprint to have proper client support and candidate support and the knowledge of each area at hand. But overall, I think some of the key traits that you look for is the honesty and transparency about that, not looking just for a company that says they can do everything, but actually backs it up and demonstrates, letting you know where they may have some shortcomings as well. And I think that's where compliance has to come up as well as a big feature of the offering. It's a buzzword in a lot of industries, but it really means a lot in ours. You want to make sure as an organization that you're protected, that the vendor you're using is doing everything above board and protecting you from running searches you shouldn't be running on a candidate based on a random law in Germany, for example. And I think in a nutshell, that all comes down to communication. There's, for all those reasons mentioned for compliance, but also for some of the things that Clyde touched on, that as an organization, you'll know best what cadence you'd like to have in terms of weekly meetings, quarterly meetings to review the success of your program and just seeing what's working and is not working. So to me, those are some of the most important things to look for.
Great. And Clyde, maybe you can touch on communication. Why do you think communication has been overlooked And why would you say that Sterling Backcheck continues to invest time and resources on one-on-one interactions with their clients?
I think, what you need to understand as an organization in this industry is that, even though it might look like we provide a single service, let's look at a criminal check, for example. That single service is impacting someone's livelihood. It's impacting their opportunity to work, feed their family. And you really have to take that seriously. With that comes, a requirement for us to be compliant in the process that we follow, but also the ability and the requirement for us to review answers before we give them to our clients and really double check to ensure that we're providing the right insights. Part of that also, I think when we talk to our clients, they really struggle because they're not in the industry of background screening. They want a partner that they can reach out to. In staffing, for example, many times we'll have an email from a client where one of their customers in another country has just provided them an outline, let's say the US, of what's required for a candidate that they want to bring on. They don't even know what the Canadian version of that would look like and what the requirements would entail. So that's where we can look to our experts internally to kind of drive that. We have a gentleman named Chuck Walker who works at our organization. He's had a long history of a career with the RCMP. We also have Mark Sword, who's a director of privacy. And Mark has worked with the PBSA, with government relations and understanding where the industry is going and how requirements are going to change. Ian is also, Iain Murray, the vertical leader that you heard from, is also part of the PBSA and really works with them on projects when it comes to public information associated to our industry and privacy. So I think when you look at all of that information, really what clients are looking for is they want to be able to reach out to one person, in my example, myself, and then I go to Ian, Chuck, to Mark, get details of what they require and bring that back to them. Secondly, if you look at my own experience with the staffing industry, when they need something answered or they have a question about a particular file, we're able to jump on that and understand that they have a client waiting, they have a candidate waiting, and they're waiting for the update from us. So we really approach that in a we need to get back to them as soon as possible. So I think that, us understanding what's happening in our client's industry inside of their organization, and then mapping that back to how we can serve them really to drive the full value out of their program and what they're, giving us the privilege to serve them for, I think is really the main reason why we invest so much in allowing lines of communication and having the resources to communicate. But again, at the client's requirements, right? My goal is not to force a call every quarter on a director of HR who doesn't have time to even have their cup of coffee in the morning. So we really like to follow our client's lead. And I think that's why Sterling invests the time and the resources to make sure communication is a big part of it. The other thing too that I find is when we do things like webinars and roundtables, I will personally, in some cases, reach out to my clients and let them know that we're doing this because we really want to ensure that they're aware that all this added value is available to them. But in many cases, my clients can't make the calls. So we give them the link to the recordings. They just have to fill out their information and they can access it whenever they want. All of those webinars that we've done are actually available on our website. Anyone can sign up and watch them.
So now that we've talked about the green flags, maybe we can discuss the red flags that organizations should be looking out for when choosing a provider. Ian, maybe you can answer this question.
Sure. I think when you talk about red flags with a background screening provider, there's probably three overarching ones that come up to me, mainly from a Canadian perspective. The first that I'd say is pertaining to ID verification. There's been a lot of change over the last decade in terms of how ID is verified. COVID-19 helped shine a light on some of that. There's an urge to bring new technology in that helps facilitate ID verification digitally. But that opens the span quite a bit, and you want to make sure that it's something that's trustworthy when you're doing it. And I think we've seen with our industry, it's obviously really important to verify someone's ID before you do a criminal record check and to not cut any corners, but also to not over-collect data. So, we've seen in the industry some organizations that will verify your ID online, but first they collect your driver's license and passport. And based on privacy legislation, that's an overreach. You should only collect it if it's necessary. So there are little things like that are really good questions that you should ask about how ID is being verified. We also hear rumblings of online ID verification passing 100% of candidates. And if it's passing 100%, that sounds convenient. It's a nice line in a sales pitch. But if you think for a moment about that, it means that your ID verification is not catching anyone who's using an expired driver's license or trying to falsify information. And from having done millions of these, we know that that number is greater than zero. There are people that even accidentally use an expired piece of ID. So that's the first one, which I think is a big one and an important question to ask. The second one I think raises red flags, touches on something I addressed moments ago, which is often American screening companies and American-based companies looking for background screening. Their policies will often include things like drug screening for regular roles here in Canada, social security number traces, provincial court searches. These items are the hallmark of a policy for another country trying to be applied to Canada. So in the US, when you run a criminal record check, you run a social security number trace to find out where the person has lived. So you can drill down to each county and perhaps state to run the appropriate check. But that's not how checks are done here in Canada. So if you're verifying their social insurance number, that has no bearing on a criminal record check. And you shouldn't be doing provincial court searches. It's not giving you the full picture of an applicant's history, especially if they lived somewhere like Ottawa or Gatineau. When you're easily going back and forth between provinces, you wouldn't be capturing records that they have elsewhere in the country. So to me, that's a big red flag. And whenever that's raised, even just from a company's policy, I try to coach them around that to update their policy and make sure it's appropriate for Canada. Thirdly, one other item that we're hearing quite a bit these days that to me raises a red flag is basically international criminal record checks can be very complex. In Canada, thankfully, there's a comprehensive national search that's available, and it's fairly quick, and it's not too costly. Other countries can cost a bit more. They take longer. There's more legislation involved in terms of when or even if you can do it. It's complex, but to get the right information, it's worth doing. There are some products out there that we see that offer a global criminal record check, and they charge $5 or $10 for it. And unfortunately, it is kind of worth what you pay for it. It's not very good. It's, I guess, the old saying, a mile wide and an inch deep. That sort of applies here. It can be the best case scenario if there are restrictions in certain countries where you can't get a local comprehensive check, but it's not best practice. And that's where I think some organizations get a bit seduced by the nice price tag and the quick turnaround time, but it's not protecting you like you think it is. You'll have, even if you use Canada as an example, if you run one of these searches, unless you're getting consent up front and verifying ID, it's not a comprehensive criminal record check. So you could be hiring people with convictions, but because it was not tagged in some media database publicly, it's not going to come back in that search. So to me, it would be a big red flag if your vendor is suggesting that there's a $5 catch-all global check that you should do on everybody. It might be a nice cherry on top, but it's no replacement for a local comprehensive check.
Thank you. So thank you, Clyde, and thank you, Iain, for taking the time to join me today and answering our questions. And I want to give a big thank you to everybody who has been listening. And if you have any questions, big or small, please do not hesitate to contact us. We have a team of experts who are ready to help. Thank you.